Perform Arts Reload. From the deep resonance of 국악 to the exquisite melody of classical music. From dramatic musicals and operas to elegant dance performances. A new dimension of artistry unfolds on the stage where tradition meets modernity. Perform Arts Reload will leave you inspired.
Days ahead of the impeachment ruling on President Yoon, the justices at the Constitutional Court are believed to be working on fine-tuning the verdict they will give. With social division running deep over the verdict, the nation's acting president underscores the need to accept the court's ruling in a calm manner and urges politicians not to instigate public unrest. U.S. President Donald Trump is set to announce a new round of tariffs tomorrow. America's trading partners are keeping close tabs, including South Korea. It's April 2nd, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter.
결연한 구국의 의지로 비상계엄을 선포하였습니다.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. The ruling on the president is slated for the day after tomorrow. With much focus at the Constitutional Court, our Oh Soo-young walks us through the formalities that may unfold on that day.
President Yoon's removal or return to power will take effect the moment his fate is stated aloud by the Constitutional Court bench on Friday. Set to be broadcast live at 11 a.m., the nation will be reading the lips of Justice Choi Sang-mok, who as the presiding judge on the case will deliver the decision by the 8-member bench. The ruling will come 111 days after the National Assembly's impeachment vote last December, following the president's martial law order. The bench's deliberation is the longest ever for a presidential case, as the ruling will be delivered 38 days after Yoon's final trial hearing in February.
While sources say the justices have reached an understanding on the verdict and even scheduled a meeting for Wednesday, most likely to discuss procedural matters, the bench is likely to sign off on that decision at the very last minute to maintain utmost confidentiality. In the case of former President Park Geun-hye in 2017, the justices arrived early in the morning of the ruling in order to finalise their decision.
If the same procedure is followed, the lead justice for the case, Choi Sang-mok, will present his opinion first, followed by other justices in reverse order of their appointments to the court. Once they establish a consensus, the bench will conduct a final review of the written judgment, collect signatures and seal the ruling. When entering the courtroom to deliver their decision, the justices will take their seats in the order of seniority, with Acting Chief Justice Moon Young-bae at the centre to declare a start to the proceedings. Typically, if there has been a unanimous decision, the lead justice explains the rationale for the ruling first, followed by the main decision. If there are dissenting or various concurring opinions, the main decision is usually read first, followed by explanations from individual justices representing differing views. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo's impeachment trial was also concluded with the bench first declaring the case dismissed before revealing various opinions. However, as the order of delivery is at the court's discretion, the style of the proceedings could vary. If the court upholds the impeachment, with the consent of at least 6 justices, President Yoon will be removed from office. If the case is dismissed or rejected on procedural grounds by 3 or more members of the bench, he will return to his duties. While previous presidents did not attend their ruling session, President Yoon may choose to show up in the courtroom, as he's done for his hearings throughout the trial. Bucheon, Arirang News.
As Korea awaits the verdict, Acting President Han Duck-soo has highlighted the importance of peacefully accepting the court's ruling, while urging politicians not to instigate division and disorder. Kim Do-yeon has more.
With the Constitutional Court's landmark decision on President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment just days away, the government is on high alert, prioritizing citizen safety, as thousands of protesters from both sides are expected to fill the streets. Acting President and Prime Minister Han Duck-soo on Wednesday presided over a meeting with safety-related ministers and Seoul Mayor Oh Se-hoon, and emphasized unity over division while calling on politicians to act responsibly.
I also urge politicians, now is the time to prioritize the stability and survival of our community above political interests. Please demonstrate a responsible stance that promotes social unity rather than division and conflict. In particular, I earnestly ask you to refrain from making remarks that may incite or provoke illegal protests and violence.
Seoul Mayor also laid out the city government's plan to keep safety and order. It's set to deploy 2,400 personnel across the city's mass gathering sites to oversee safety. Public transport will be run according to the situation, except for Anguk Station on Line 3, which will be closed on the day of the verdict. Buses are set to take detours, while certain key metro stations such as Yeouido and Gwanghwamun will be closely monitored to operate according to the crowd situation.
Honourable citizens, the Seoul Metropolitan Government deeply respects everyone's right to express their opinion. At the same time, we reiterate that safeguarding a safe and peaceful daily life for our citizens is also a precious value that must be protected.
The police and relevant ministries have also laid out their plans. Starting at 9 a.m. on April 3rd, the police agency will be on emergency duty. Starting at midnight on April 4th, 100% of its available officers will be deployed to assigned positions. The Safety Ministry will be in charge of the safety adjustments overall, while the Ministry of Science and ICT will be in charge of stationing additional mobile-based stations so citizens' phone services aren't disrupted due to large gatherings. The government's alertness comes with good reason. Protesters for both sides have been gathering, with intensity mounting as polarized views clash in close areas. Most recently, there was an attack at a local court in Seoul where supporters of Yoon raided the building, vandalized it, and used violence against authorities. Back in 2017, after the last presidential impeachment verdict, when President Park Geun-hye's impeachment was upheld, her supporters caused riots charging toward the police. This left 4 people dead. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
An opposition-led impeachment motion against Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok was reported to the National Assembly's plenary session this afternoon. The motion accuses Choi, during his time as acting president, of delaying the appointment of Constitutional Court Justice nominee Ma Eun-hyuk. Ma had been recommended for the court by the opposition Democratic Party. A vote on the impeachment motion must take place between 24 and 72 hours after being reported to the plenary session. The DP plans to decide whether to proceed with the votes based on the ruling in President Yoon's impeachment trial on Friday. The ruling People Power Party criticized the move to impeach Choi, calling it an attack on the country's economy and demanding its immediate withdrawal. International relief agencies are ramping up their efforts to aid Myanmar after a devastating earthquake, with time running out. Our PUNG spoke with people who are offering a helping hand as they respond to the latest crisis on the ground.
Homes are destroyed and lives are lost in Myanmar after the country was hit by its largest earthquake in more than a century. The death toll has already exceeded 2,700, despite the efforts of rescuers desperately searching for survivors. International organizations are rushing to help, as residents in hardest-hit regions are in urgent need of shelter and essential items such as clean water, food, and hygiene kits. A representative of the UN Refugee Agency in Myanmar, based in Yangon, said the latest earthquake is a crisis on top of a crisis, as the country already had more than 3 million people displaced from the ongoing armed conflict, even before the earthquake.
And this area, particular area of north and central and northwestern part of Myanmar, it was already the home of 1.6 million IDPs, internally displaced people. On the top of that, we do think that almost 50 million people have been affected by this earthquake, and among which 3.8 million, which is quite a devastating number, 3.8 million people are considered to be living in the area that was hardest hit by the earthquake. So the impact, you can imagine, is quite enormous.
The country director for Solidaritas International, a France-based NGO who's also in Yangon, said local responders are starting to get exhausted and that they're running out of resources. He highlighted that the situation is at a turning point, adding that efficient collaboration between local teams and international organizations is crucial in order to gather all available resources.
Mostly, we are going to support local responders when it comes to displacement sites for people that have been evacuating the city of Mandalay because of fear of building continuing to collapse and being affected. We know already that quite a lot of people have now been spending 3 nights out in the streets with no shelter, with no immediate protection. So that's
With hospitals, schools, and public infrastructure now destroyed, there are concerns not only with regard to basic needs, but also healthcare and the educational system. The vice president of the International Rescue Committee said teams have been sent to a town near the epicenter of the earthquake, where 80% of the buildings have been compromised, and explained that the impact of an earthquake can last years.
It's been heartening to see the response that's been mounted so far, but we know this is going to be an effort that's going to take not weeks but months, possibly years, to fully recover from a crisis like this.
As the devastated country struggles to cope with the aftermath of the powerful earthquake, local communities are still awaiting international aid and support. Bucheon, Arirang News.
In other news, America's trading partners are keeping a close eye on a new round of tariffs by the Trump administration, details of which will be disclosed tomorrow, such as which countries to be included and in what way it'll be imposed. Lee Soo-jin explains.
U.S. President Donald Trump's pending tariffs will go into effect immediately after they are announced, according to a White House spokesperson on Tuesday local time.
My understanding is that the tariff announcement will come tomorrow. They will be effective immediately. He's with his trade and tariff team right now, perfecting it to make sure this is a perfect deal for the American people and the American worker.
The tariffs are set to be announced by Trump at a Rose Garden ceremony at 4 p.m. Eastern Time on April 2nd, which is 5 a.m. on the 3rd here in Korea. He has repeatedly touted April 2nd as Liberation Day as he believes that his policies will free American industries from what he calls unfair trade practices. And according to U.S. media outlets, including the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, the Trump administration is considering various tariff strategies. One is imposing a 20% flat tariff on all imports. Another is assigning each country a reciprocal tariff number that corresponds to tariffs and other trade barriers on U.S. products. And the U.S. Trade Representative is also considering a third option where levies, likely to be lower than the universal 20%, would be imposed on a wide range of imports from select countries. For South Korea, these tariffs are expected to add further pressure as they come amid a wave of other tariffs, such as the 25% auto tariff set to go into effect on April 2nd and collected the following day. And just last month, the Trump administration imposed sweeping 25% tariffs on aluminum and steel. But despite the country's leadership vacuum, the Korean government is holding various emergency meetings to come up with response measures. Acting President Han Duck-soo on Tuesday, along with the industry, finance, and foreign ministers, met with heads of Korea's top 4 conglomerates, Samsung Electronics, Hyundai Motor, SK, and LG, where Han pledged to continue high-level U.S. outreach and to work with the private sector to respond to the challenges posed by the tariffs. 이수진, Arirang News.
Inflation at home remained within the 2% range in March for the third month in a row. Park Jun-han covers the latest finding.
South Korea's consumer price data shows steady inflation in the low 2% range over the past 3 months. In March, consumer prices increased by 2.1% compared to March the previous year. The inflation over the past 3 months is slightly higher than September to December last year, when inflation was in the 1% range. The price of cabbages went up by 49.7%, and radishes went up by 86.4%. The price of processed foods rose by 3.6%. That's the biggest jump in 15 months, pushing overall inflation up by 0.3 percentage points. Statistics Korea attributed the increase in processed food prices to 3 factors: a rise in raw material prices, the high foreign exchange rate, and rising labor and energy costs. Meanwhile, the cost of services also went up, with both public and personal services seeing price rises. The price of public services, which include things like transport and tuition fees, increased by 1.4% year-on-year. The increase was mainly due to the rise in private university tuition. The price of personal services is 3.1% higher than a year ago. The increase was due to increased demand in trips in March. Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok pledged at the ministerial meeting on economic affairs to use the government's full range of capabilities to stabilize perceived inflation.
In April and May, we will allocate an additional 30 billion Korean won to support agricultural product discounts, and we will supply more than 100 tons of cabbages and radishes to the market every day to stabilize supply and demand. We will also lower the price burden of food ingredients through new quota tariffs on raw pork meat and processed egg products.
The Bank of Korea on Wednesday said that the inflation rate is expected to remain stable around the target level of 2%. It also added that there is still a lot of uncertainty around the foreign exchange rate and oil price movements, as well as domestic demand. The central bank said it will keep a keen eye on future inflation levels. Park Jun-han, Arirang News.
The number of foreign nationals who visited South Korea last year for medical procedures was nearly double compared to the year before. According to the Health Ministry on Wednesday, the number reached around 1.2 million, the highest since the country's medical tourism program began in 2009. Since then, the total has exceeded 5 million. By nationality, Japan topped the list, accounting for over 37%, followed by China and the U.S. And over half came over to have dermatology treatment. South Korea has from today implemented its new top-tier visa system to attract high-quality foreign talent in cutting-edge industries. This visa program is designed to qualify top-level engineers who will oversee projects and spearhead technological advancements in sectors such as semiconductors, biotechnology, and secondary batteries. Eligibility requires foreigners to have a master's degree or PhD from a top 100 global graduate school. Also, applicants must have professional experience in global institutions and an annual salary that exceeds 3 times the GNI per capita. Korea is ushering in the sights and sounds of spring. That being said, our Lee Eun-hee sheds light on a flower festival to celebrate this particular season.
The Bucheon Azalea Festival is blooming. The vibrant pink azaleas have people soaking up the spring vibes. Bucheon City, not too far from Seoul, is hosting this beautiful festival at Bucheon Stadium and Wonmisan Mountain or Wonmisan Azalea Hill. The trails around Wonmisan Azalea Hill offer a great opportunity to enjoy both the stunning azalea blossoms and the natural beauty of the landscape while hiking. It's a perfect way to soak in the scenery and get some fresh air.
I visit every year. Taking in the scenery brings me a sense of peace. Now, at 72, I find myself reflecting on the beauty of life and the passing of time.
So it was my first time to come and to see these beautiful flowers, and I came to see the azalea blossom, and then I roamed around and saw lots of beautiful flowers, and then I found out the market which was nearby, and there I enjoyed the food and all these. It was crowded, but if you want to have beautiful like aesthetic photos for your Instagram or social media, I recommend you to visit here. Yeah.
A key goal of the festival is to boost the local economy by hosting a variety of events and activities, such as making custom azalea-themed bags.
The Azalea Festival is timed to coincide with the spring bloom, transforming open spaces at Bucheon Stadium into interactive attractions. To promote cultural tourism and support the local economy, the festival features a flea market with local artists, small business product sales, and a variety of food trucks.
Many other spring blossom festivals across South Korea are still running. Other major festivals include the Daegu E-World Blossom Picnic, Taean Tulip Festival, Jinhae Gunangje Festival, and Koksong World Rose Festival. The Bucheon Azalea Festival will run until April 6th. However, music performances have been cancelled as a mark of respect for those affected by the recent tragic wildfires in Gyeongsangbuk-do Province. Spring is here, but so are heartbreaking losses. Lee Eun-hee, Arirang News.
BTS J-Hope has entered the Billboard Hot 100 chart for a 7th time, tying with his bandmate Jungkook for the most entries by a K-pop soloist. According to Billboard's latest chart released on April 1st local time, J-Hope's single Mona Lisa debuted at number 65 on the Hot 100. This marks his 3rd charting song just this year, following I'll Be Back and Sweet Dreams.
Rain clouds from the West Sea have been gradually covering large parts of the country. Rain started in the Seoul metropolitan area and the west coast of Chungcheongnam-do province during the day today and spread to the central parts in the late afternoon. With only 5 to 10 millimeters of rain, most of it will stop tonight. This spring rain is not enough to clear the stuffy air. Seoul, Incheon, southern parts of Gyeonggi-do province, Chungcheongnam-do province, and Jeollabuk-do province will have bad levels of ultrafine dust tomorrow. Tomorrow morning will start mild with Seoul, Gwangju, and Daegu at 6 degrees Celsius and Daejeon at 5 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 14 to 17 degrees all over the country. There's more rain forecast across the country on Saturday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world. That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.
플라스틱 사실 편리하잖아요. 저조차도 활동을 하고 있지만 플라스틱을 사용할 정도로 생활에 많이 있다고 생각을 하는데요. 플라스틱을 대체할 수 있는 걸 계속해서 찾고 플라스틱이 아닌 다른 것을 사용하는 게 일상의 습관이 될 수 있도록 하는 것이 조금 중요하다고 생각을 해서 참새클럽 캠페인을 중점으로 활동하고 있습니다. 저희는 HDP랑 PP라는 두 가지 재질의 플라스틱을 모으고 있습니다. 보통 음식류에 사용되기 때문에 배달용기나 이런 곳에서 많이 볼 수 있고, 그리고 두 번째로는 저희가 업사이클 가공을 할 때 가장 유독물질이 덜 나오는 물질이기 때문입니다. 플라스틱을 많이 모으고 많이 제작하는 것이 목적이 아니다 보니까 저희는 시민분들한테 플라스틱 기부받고 리워드를 드리는 게 아니라 모아주신 플라스틱이 이렇게 재활용됐다는 걸 알리기 위해서 하는 프로젝트여가지고 이걸 약간 기부가 아닌 돌려드리는 개념으로 지금 하는 규칙을 사용하고 있는 것 같습니다. 불편한 거예요. 사실 이 플라스틱을 실제로 사용하는 걸 모으고 이걸 세척해서 가져오시고 하는 과정이 이 불편함을 사실 해주고 계신 것만으로도 저희는 되게 감사하죠. 나아가서 플라스틱을 사용하지 않을 수 있는 방법을 내는 것이 저희의 숙제이고요. 그리고 가장 중요한 건 이런 자원순환 활동에 있어서 시민 참여가 어떻게 얼마나 중요한 키워드로 적용이 되는지를 계속 말씀을 드리고 싶어요. 그래서 시민 참여 가이드를 조금 내는 게 저희의 목표이자 바람이라고 말씀드릴 수 있습니다. 나는 플라스틱을 순환시키는 그리너다.
다른 사람들한테 말하면 안 돼.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gen. As tensions on the Korean Peninsula continue, U.S. President Donald Trump is once again signaling openness to diplomacy, revealing that lines of communication with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un are still active. Let's have a listen.
Well, I do. I have a very good relationship with Kim Jong-un. Now, you people hate to hear that, but it's very important. I got along with him fantastically, as you know. It started off very rough, very nasty. Little rocket man, the whole thing was a nasty deal. And then one day we got a call that they'd like to meet. We met. We have a great relationship. And yeah, we have, there is communication, yeah. I think it's very important. You know, he's a big nuclear nation. And he's a very smart guy. I got to know him very well.
Trump's latest comments, delivered during a press availability at the White House, have reignited debate over the future of U.S.-North Korea relations and the possibilities for a fourth Trump-Kim summit. Trump's reference to the regime as a big nuclear nation is also drawing attention, prompting fresh questions about whether Washington's denuclearization policy may be shifting. For a deeper discussion on this, we invite our go-to North Korea expert, Dr. Ko Myung-hyun, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of National Security Strategy. Welcome to the studio.
Thanks for having me.
And also joining us online is Frank Januzzi, President and CEO of the Marine and Mike Mansfield Foundation. Great to have you.
Nice to be back with you, Ms. Kim.
So let's start a discussion with Dr. Go. So President Trump, like I've said, hinted at ongoing communication with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, and he said that he would probably do something at some point. How could we interpret his statement, and do you think a fourth summit is likely?
Well, you know, that's always on the table. But I think President Trump is being clever, in my view. We know that despite all these friendly expressions from President Trump, as well as sometimes, you know, I mean, there's a lack of friendly reaction from North Korea, but nonetheless, North Koreans are withholding criticism of President Trump, at least for now. So there's some warmth to this relationship for sure. But I think that President Trump is making all these vague claims of good relations, as well as hinting at perhaps recognizing North Korea as a nuclear state with the use of the expression big nuclear power. Because I think President Trump is fully aware that in reality, there's a huge gap between the negotiation position of the two sides. United States, especially, despite what President Trump has said to the media, on paper is still in fact committed to North Korea's denuclearization, and that has been reaffirmed in the last U.S.-Japan summit between President Trump and Prime Minister Ishiba. So clearly the U.S. government's policy is North Korea's denuclearization, which is very much opposed by North Korea. North Korea is claiming that given its rapid progress in nuclear capability build-up, they is claiming that now it's a bona fide nuclear power, and if there's going to be any dialogue between Pyongyang and Washington, it should be about North Korea's being accepted as a nuclear state. So, because as you can see, there's a huge gap between the two. But I think President Trump personally is interested in managing this situation, and he understands that if you want to have a dialogue, despite the fact that there's a huge gap in the initial negotiation position, then you have to be nice to the other side. So even though that creates, on one hand, this speculation and concern, maybe that the United States government has changed its policy towards North Korea. Maybe the United States is now ready to accept North Korea as a nuclear state. But I think the upside is that a dialogue with North Korea is also possible. So I think President Trump is playing this kind of a game right now with Kim Jong-un. If Kim Jong-un commits to dialogue with the United States, I guess that could be an opportunity for at least two sides to discuss denuclearization. So in that sense, I think we should give President Trump benefit of doubt, in my view.
Right, so it's part of his strategy dealing with North Korea. Let me also ask this question to Mr. Januzzi. Trump has referred to Kim Jong-un as a smart guy and North Korea as a big nuclear nation as well. What kind of implications could this rhetoric have for future denuclearization talks and international perceptions of North Korea's nuclear status?
Well, I largely agree with Dr. Go. The fact is that there cannot be any negotiations with North Korea until you actually establish those communication channels. And despite what the president said in the Oval Office, to the best of my knowledge, there is no communication currently. But really, we need to look at President Trump's statement as the opening overture. There is some flattery there of Kim Jong-un. There is some clear effort to remind Kim Jong-un that the two leaders did come close to an agreement in Hanoi, and that President Trump remains interested in dialogue if North Korea is interested. I think that the silence from Pyongyang so far in response to President Trump's comments is a very positive sign. It means that they are studying his words and they are considering, or at least thinking about, re-engaging with the Trump administration. Remember that for 4 years under President Biden, there was essentially zero communication, and every overture by the Biden administration was quickly rebuffed and turned down by the North Koreans. So the silence here is promising. I think the real question will be whether the President, Trump, is capable of sustaining an initiative, as he did in his first term, to try to reach out to North Korea. President Biden is sometimes criticized for adopting Obama's strategic patience approach. I think no one would really accuse President Trump of being strategic or patient, but he is clearly interested in dialogue. And North Korea, through their silence, is communicating that they themselves may be willing to re-engage. But the circumstances today are so different than they were in 2018 that it may require a different approach.
Right, so we'll really have to see how the regime responds to this. But mentioning about the big nuclear nation and nuclear power title by the Trump 2.0 administration, Dr. Go, could you clarify for us how North Korea is officially viewed in terms of NPT framework and what strategic messaging is is Trump playing in use of such phrases?
Oh, exactly. So, I mean, the expressions such as a big nuclear power, in fact, doesn't really have a legal significance or even like a political significance per se. It's actually a nice phrasing in a way. But then within the context of a nuclear proliferation, the reference that the President Trump is making, insinuating that North Korea is a nuclear state, is very serious. Because right now, when it comes to international security, the most important concern is nuclear proliferation. And that has been the case for decades. So the international community has established essentially a security framework called the Non-Proliferation Treaty in 1970. So the objective of the NPT is to limit the nuclear proliferation among states. So the many states around the world, they essentially signed up with the NPT. They committed to not to develop nuclear weapons, except for the original 5 nuclear powers which have tested and completed their nuclear development before 1970 when the NPT was signed. So these are they also happen to be the permanent members of the Security Council. So these countries are United States, Russia, China, United Kingdom, and France. And other countries have committed not to develop nuclear weapons. And North Korea, in fact, was part of the NPT. And then, so any country that has actually a country that has nuclear weapons is called nuclear state. And nuclear state has, in fact, a very strict meaning, because a nuclear state is a state that actually is recognized by the NPT as a country that legitimately has the right to have nuclear weapons. These are the P5s. So but also there are countries that have nuclear weapons outside of the NPT regime, and these are the unofficial nuclear states, and they happen to be India, Pakistan, and Israel. And even though they developed their nuclear capability, quote unquote, illegally, but their nuclear status has been accepted as fact now. So they are called de facto nuclear states. So then what is North Korea? North Korea essentially is in the gray zone. Clearly North Korea has nuclear capability, but then they don't have the right to develop or possess nuclear weapons. And this is the reason why they are under sanctions right now. So when the United States government, and especially President Trump, making, essentially using expressions such as North Korea is now a big nuclear nation, so there's a clearly reference to a nuclear state, but it's not quite there yet. So that's why, as Mr. Janussi and I said before, we think that President Trump is not using the expression big nuclear nation as a way to recognize North Korea as a nuclear state, but more like an overture for dialogue. But at the same time, it actually creates concern that maybe North Korea could be accepted as a nuclear state or de facto nuclear state, like the three nations that have nuclear weapons outside of the NPT regime.
Right, especially it's coming from U.S. President Donald Trump,
Exactly.
That's why. Now, despite these comments, U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Lando underscored America's commitment to the complete denuclearization of North Korea during his phone talks with his South Korean counterpart on Tuesday. Mr. Janussi, how should we interpret Washington's stance on denuclearization of North Korea again?
Well, I think that Dr. Go is correct that the key thing to understand here is that it is precisely because of the regional and global dimensions of the nuclear non-proliferation challenge that the United States must not, and I think will not, accept North Korea as a nuclear power. For the United States to do so would be an invitation to Iran to proceed with nuclear weapons development. It would be an invitation to Taiwan, South Korea ultimately, and then maybe even Japan, to develop nuclear arsenals in order to deter a North Korean nuclear capability, which the world rejects. So the president's words are essentially, on the one hand, recognizing the reality that for the last 19 years, we've been living with a nuclear-armed North Korea. But it does not represent an abandonment of the long-term goal of denuclearization, nor do I expect that President Trump would ever abandon that goal. So he's trying to walk a fine line, flattery, recognizing North Korea's capability, while preserving, as the Deputy Secretary indicated, America's commitment to the long-term goal of denuclearization. But again, I have to emphasize that would be a long-term goal. No one expects North Korea to denuclearize quickly. An overnight denuclearization would be both technically and politically impossible.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, we'll have to look on the long term on that. Now, looking back, let's go back to the 2018 and 2019 summits as well between President Trump and Kim. What lessons or outcomes should Trump's second term take into account for re-engagement with Pyongyang?
I think what President Trump got right in his first term was that negotiation with North Korea is a top-down affair, that building from the bottom up, as previous administrations had attempted to do, ultimately runs into so many bureaucratic and administrative challenges that you never get the breakthrough. But what they failed to do was to correctly assess North Korea's actual interests. There's a temptation in negotiations for nations to project onto another nation what their interests should be. And as a thought exercise, imagine if the United States and South Korea were to give North Korea everything that North Korea is looking for: sanctions relief, economic investment, diplomatic recognition, an end of the Korean War. Would North Korea be satisfied? Are these really the things that North Korea values? I think an argument can be made that such a world in which North Korea had to exist normally in the international community would be very challenging for the Kim Jong-un regime, deprived of an enemy, deprived of an excuse to blame for the nation's economic poor performance, deprived of the rationale for his military expenditures. So a lesson to be learned from the failure of the Hanoi summit: don't project onto North Korea your own interests. Listen to them, try to figure out what their interests are, and engage realistically and see if there's middle ground to be found.
Right, that's a very interesting point. So we'll have to really look into what North Korea actually wants, what's in their interests. That would be key to further discussions. Now, Mr. Januzzi, in response to Trump's latest remarks, South Korea's Unification Ministry has reaffirmed that denuclearization of North Korea remains the unified goal of Seoul and Washington and the international community. In your view, is this goal still realistic given the evolving global and regional dynamics?
Well, I do believe it's essential for the United States to retain that as the goal, and I think clearly South Korea intends to do the same. South Korea does not want to have to develop its own independent nuclear arsenal to defend against North Korea. I think the Chinese are also important players here to take into account. During a recent visit to Beijing, a U.S. interlocutor hinted at the idea that perhaps the Trump administration might accept North Korea as a nuclear power, and the Chinese were appalled. So I think that retaining the goal is essential, but being realistic about how we get there is also important. And it would be a long-term process and not an overnight one, as I said before. But I think your question gets to a larger question, which is the close coordination that is always necessary between Washington and Seoul when it comes to engagement with North Korea. And President Trump has a preference for bilateral relations and bilateral negotiations. And one of the things that his administration will grapple with is the reality that no deal with North Korea can work without the strong support of South Korea. It is the Korean peninsula, not the American peninsula. And so this is something that will test President Trump's diplomatic inclinations, because he really has a preference, I think, for one-on-one high-level dialogue. And he's going to need to engage with the South Korean government, which is why South Korea's own political internal challenges need to be overcome so that the South Korean government can be a strong partner with the United States on any engagement that may be coming in the coming months.
Right. I wanted to ask this question to Dr. Go in the latter part of our discussion, but as Mr. Januzzi has mentioned, then do you have any ideas on how South Korea could remain, not being sidelined in talks with U.S. and North Korea?
Well, clearly, Mr. Januzzi is pointing out that South Korea should place its own house in order, get ready for the upcoming dialogue, not just with the United States, but also with North Korea. He's exactly right. But then, for now, those conditions are not being met, but hopefully it's going to be resolved soon. But on the other hand, the alliance between South Korea and the United States is not just based on people, based on the personal relationship between two leaders, for instance. It has been institutionalized for decades. So there are high-level discussions at the working level, but also what's very important is the meal-to-meal communication and coordination between the South Korean military and the United States military. That's why we have the Combined Forces Command and also as the Indo-Pacific Command. So this level of dialogue and coordination that have already taken place and taking place right now guarantees that, I mean, in a way, at least South Korea is going to have an ear when it comes to the policy decision that's being made in Washington, as well as the potential dialogue between Pyongyang and Washington. So, well, I think that, in fact, mitigates some of the concerns that we have about South Korea being potentially sidelined in the dialogue that President Trump is pursuing with Kim Jong-un.
Right, so further discussions on effort and proactive efforts would be necessary. Now, meanwhile, Dr. Go, U.S. Air Force Secretary nominee Troy Mink warned that North Korea has already demonstrated capabilities to jam satellite communication and GPS as well. How credible do you think is North Korea's counter-space capacity, and what are its implications for security?
So, the Secretary nominee has pointed out, clearly North Korea possesses some counter-space capabilities. They are able to jam communication And that's worrisome, and also GPS signals. But then I think that they haven't reached the level that the counter space capability that United States and China and Russia possess, which is using direct kinetic means to go after the satellites themselves in space. North Korea hasn't reached that level, but then they clearly have some electronic warfare capabilities. But at the same time, we shouldn't be rested sure for the fact that North Korea doesn't have that capability yet. They might acquire that capability very soon, especially because the suspicions of Russian assistance in this domain. Russia has assisted North Korea in perfecting its rocket launch technology and know-how. We know this because North Korea has finally succeeded in launching an military spy satellite with Russia itself. So it's likely that the Russia itself extends to other parts of counter space capability. If indeed that's the case, it's really a major threat to South Korea and the United States joint defense posture, because much of the communication now takes place in space through the satellite networks, as well as the most important means to predict and preempt North Korea's threats to South Korea and Japan, which are the ISR capabilities, intelligence and surveillance and reconnaissance capabilities. They're all based in space, or mostly based in space. So in that sense, I think we should be prepared for North Korea eventually acquiring this counter space capability with Russia itself, probably.
Right, so it's not yet as competitive, but it's still concerning.
Yep.
Now, then, Mr. Januzi, to what extent do you think are North Korea's cyber operations integrated into its broader military strategy, or used as asymmetric tools to fund its weapons of mass destruction programs?
Well, as your question suggests, I would view the North Korean cyber capabilities mostly as a revenue-generating arm of the North Korean government. Of course, there are concerning military dimensions to the problem as well. The United States and South Korea and Japan all need to improve their cyber defenses, because if there were to be a crisis, North Korea's efforts to penetrate our communication systems, to disrupt our ability to defend ourselves using the most advanced technologies, surely they would have a cyber dimension to that threat. But cyber is sort of the modern mafia world. In the past, it used to be gambling and liquor. Now it's cyber crime. And North Korea is expected to generate hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue from cyber crimes. And these monies do flow directly into the regime, into their military capabilities, and are used by the government to fund important ventures, including their work in space and advanced weapon systems, as well as more conventional weapon systems such as drones. So North Korea's cyber activity represents North Korea understanding that the modern mafia, if you will, doesn't do smuggled cigarettes, liquor, and gambling. The modern mafia operates in the cyber realm and is pillaging the international community, robbing hundreds of millions of dollars from cryptocurrencies and through various internet schemes in order to generate revenue for what is a government that is very in short supply of legitimate means to generate the money that they need to support their weapons infrastructure.
Right. So by calling it a modern mafia, you really, we could actually feel how concerning the situation is. So we'll really have to exert a lot of efforts globally to handle this problem. But we'll have to leave our discussion right here, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your insights tonight, Dr. Go.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
And Mr. Januzi, we appreciate it so much.
감사합니다. Thank you very much.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.
Are you curious about Korean cultural heritage?
If you are a fan of Korean culture and history, listen up. Korean cultural heritage is based on a 5,000-year history.
The whole country is like a massive museum because it possesses such diverse cultural properties. Let's not wait any longer and take a look.
First, for beginners, for those who are not familiar with Korea, let's start with the world-famous list.
You can see how Korea's beautiful traditional patterns and historical features have been preserved.
And don't forget to experience Korea's intangible cultural heritage. From Gangang-sule to Talchum, there's just so many exciting cultural heritages to experience.